Hi guys, it's Danielle with the Woodland Market and Studio here in Wallace. Today I'm going to show you how to paint your sign. I'm going to turn the camera down and give you some step-by-step instructions on how to paint your sign kit. Okay, we're going to run through the supplies. You need your board and stencil. You need a jar of water, or some kind of container with water, a variety of paints. I have a bunch here. This is the brand I recommend if you're running to Walmart. Make sure it says matte finish. I have some other ones that just say acrylic. As long as they don't say satin finish or glossy, you're good. And then the Mod Podge, I supply that with your order. A little bit of sandpaper, something to a towel or paper towel, a rag to dry your brushes with. I have a variety of brushes and a squeegee, but you can use a debit card, a gift card, something like that to squeegee your stencil down. So what I'm going to start with is just painting my board. And I'm just going to get some of my white acrylic paint. I'm just going to use one of these sponge brushes. You don't need a fancy brush, although these things are usually just a one use for me. They don't seem to hold up very well. So what I'm doing is just going to paint the base of the board. I'm just going to get a nice smooth coat. I turned it over. This one has a little ding right there inside that knot, but it also has it on the other side. So I just tried to find, you know, the smoothest side. There's always one side that has some issue on it. It's wood. And the stencil will work even if it has a little dent or ding in it. So I'm just going to quickly paint this, and I'm going to paint my edges as well. I need a lot more paint than that. And I'm just going to get my edges all painted up. You don't have to worry about the back, but you do have to paint the edges because they show on the wall. So I'm going to real quickly paint that, and we'll get back to so that's 2 thin coats on there. I didn't wait for them to dry in between. I did the edges and then I added another coat to the top. So now we're just going to set this by a fan, and actually I'm going to put this in the water, get the paint off, and the other 2 that I tried. I'm picky about my brushes. I really like a brush that lays on a bunch of paint. So got it all painted, and I'm going to carefully go put it by the fan to let it dry. And we want it to dry completely. If it's cold to the touch, it's not dry. So a heater vent is a great place at home. I always put it by a heater vent. When I'm here at the shop, I put it by a box fan, and I just blow it dry for about 10 to 20 minutes. So I let this dry about 20 minutes, and it is not cold to the touch. If it's cold to the touch, it's not dry. And then when you sand it, it'll just make a mess. So if you feel it after it's completely dry, you'll know it if it's dry. It's also kind of rough to the touch, and our stencil does not like to stick. It'll have bumps and paint will bleed under. So what we do is take the sandpaper that I gave you in your kit and just really lightly with the grain of the wood, get it smooth, get some of those brush strokes out. I'm kind of a quick painter, so I'm kind of slap it on there, and then there's brush strokes. And that is really, so I think I went over that 3 times with the sandpaper. That's really all you need. Dust it off really well with a paper towel or a lint-free rag, or whatever. Just make sure it's nice and clean so the stencil also sticks. You'll know when you put your hand on it and it's not covered in paint or chalk. So what I'm going to do is get my stencil ready. Yours will come ready. Mine is not at the moment. So I'm going to get that ready and I'll be right back. Okay, so just in case, so my stencil's all ready to go. It has 3 pieces. It has a top transfer tape, which is this clear tape on top that we will pull off as the last step. What we want to do is flip it over in order to peel the stencil off. You want to peel off this part with the grid lines on it. But first, what I want to do is show you, if you're really worried about getting it centered, because these stencils tend to hang over and they're not quite centered on the stencil itself, you could find center of your stencil. So from here to here, it's 10 inches. So at about 5, you could put a little pencil mark and then stencil, or on the board itself, which is about 12 inches, not quite, put a little pencil mark. So if that way you, if you really want to make sure she's lined up correctly. So when you go to place it on, you just line up those 2 lines and she'll be ready to go. Make sure that the bottom and the top, are not hanging off on any edge. So in order to remove your stencil or to place your stencil, there are 3 pieces. Like I said, the back you want to remove first. This is the grid line section is how you know what to remove. So I just find a corner and start pulling the white back off of the blue. Now, see how this is coming up right here? You lay it back down and stick it down with your finger and just keep sliding. And if any of the blue comes up on here, like this is doing right here, if you keep pulling, if you pull really hard, this is going to rip your stencil. So you don't want that to happen. Just go really slow, and I kind of work it back and forth. I kind of go at a diagonal and see right here how this is coming. The blue will not come off. You can lay it down, use like a credit card or old gift card and rub it some more. And I'm going to come at it from a different angle. And it's still being picky. So just go really slow with this part. Don't pull really fast. And it's okay to touch the sticky part. Just don't touch it to your clothes. There we go. So notice how this is completely clear of any blue. If you see anything that's blue on here, you can peel it off and put it down. It's usually something small. And then you just flip your stencil over, and I try to get it to a point, the center down, and I find my little mark that I made. This is super sticky and it's gonna stick as soon as you put it down. So try not to touch it until you're about really ready. So I line it up to my mark, and I'm gonna scoot it up a little bit so my 25 cents part doesn't fall off the edge. And I try to get it down the center and then one side, and then the other side. And just smooth it out. There's bubbles in there, so you want to smooth it out. And then you want to take your gift card and you just want to give it a good rub down. You don't have to like go crazy with it. It doesn't have to be, you know, a 5-minute process. Just make sure, like, when you see some little tiny things, make sure those little things inside the lettering, you rub it down good. And it doesn't matter, like, I've just totally destroyed this little section of the transfer tape. That's okay, because we're going to take that off. So most stencils start in the center and have a little part that you can peel off towards the bottom. And I literally just slide it off like this, nice and slow. Because again, if any of this blue comes up onto here, you're gonna wanna lay it back down and rub it down some more so it sticks to that board and comes off your transfer tape. Don't just yank on this, because if I yanked on that, see how all of this center of my lemon would just be gone. So I'm just gonna rub it down some more, give it some good pressure, and try again. Now if that was still lifting up, I would go from this angle and try and pull it from this angle and see if it will stay down that way. But you can just kind of slide it back and forth, and that will be the safest way to do it. Then there's another side. Again, just super slow and cautiously pull that transfer tape, or slide that transfer tape off. Don't pull it off really fast. It's not a Band-Aid. You want it to stay. There we go. I save this backing part of the stencil and I use it as my palette. So that way you're not having to use like a paper plate, or, you know, find something else to use. So the next step on this is the Mod Podge. It'll come in a little container from me. If you're using Mod Podge that you have at home, make sure it's a matte finish. You don't want a glossy Mod Podge for this project. So I'm just gonna use, you know, kind of a bigger brush. It doesn't matter, it can be even bigger, you know, like a 2-inch brush, because it's just gonna go on to seal the edges so the paint doesn't bleed underneath the stencil. And I only put a tiny, tiny amount. And then I go back through and smooth it out. You want this flat and just kind of non-existent. You don't want any lumps. You don't want any chunks of Mod Podge. My Mod Podge at the shop is sometimes lumpy, and I'll try to clean all that out. See how thick that is? It does not need to be that thick. So I go back through and smooth it out. You just want it really, really thin. One thing about Mod Podge is it leaves kind of a shadow of where you've been. So when it's dry, you can go back and look at it and make sure that you put the Mod Podge everywhere it needed to be. This is kind of our insurance policy, especially with kid ones, that the paint isn't going to bleed under and cause a bunch of messiness, paint underneath the stencil. But you really, really just need a super thin coat. And if there's a big opening like this lemon, or like in the state of Idaho, you want to cover the entire thing. If you just go around the edges, you'll see that when you paint it. So just go ahead and cover that whole thing. It's just really thin. It dries really fast, especially if you put it on thin like this. I barely have any Mod Podge on my brush. And I'm just going back over it, making sure she's really, really smooth. I have a little bubble right here where my stencil folded up. On my 25, it still looks normal. You can still read it, so I'm just gonna seal it down with the Mod Podge and go with it. So this is gonna take 1 or 2 minutes to dry. it'll be really fast, and then we will move on to our painting. Okay, I'm gonna get my paint ready, and I apologize right now for my cutting machine in the background cutting stencils. I'm trying to do two things at once, so it shouldn't be too loud and too long. So I've got just a little bit of each color. It's not gonna take much paint. One of these bottles will do several signs. So I got fresh water, one paintbrush. You could use a couple of them. I just pretty much use one, and just wash the brush in between. My Mod Podge is completely dry, not sticky. It's nice and smooth, and ready to go. No lumps. If you had like a Mod Podge that had chunks in it, just go ahead and, you know, get rid of some of those little lumps if it has some. I'm gonna start with this green over here, and I'm just gonna paint my leaf. And I'm just trying to fill in the whole leaf from side to side on my stencil. And I'm just going side to side. I'm not going up and down. I'm not bouncing it, and I'm not applying a ton of paint. This is a very thin coat. I'm just gonna do the next one. You just really need a very little amount. The thicker you put it on and the lumpier you put it on, it's gonna come out lumpy. So you just wanna make it nice and thin. It does not need to be a ton of paint. Just take your time with it. This is a creative, fun process that, you know, just take your time and enjoy it. I think I'm also going to do these little lines in the green. And I hadn't even thought about what I was going to paint or how I was going to paint this. I just picked these three colors and thought, I'll figure it out as I go. Just going very, very thin. Smooth coats. You can go back through, especially if you're helping kids, and smooth out their paint or have them smooth it out. And then while that dries, that's all the green I'm gonna do. I'm gonna move on to the next color. So I like to smash my brush up and down to the bottom of the jar to get the paint off. It works really well. And then wipe it off, and then I dry it completely with a towel. And I always test it to see if it's getting my hand soaking wet or not. And then kind of straighten her out. And I'm gonna move on to the lemon color. And I'm just gonna paint the whole lemon yellow. Oops, I got a little bit of green. That's okay, it's art. A little green in my yellow is not gonna hurt anything. But see how well this is covering? It really does not need to be thick. This is thin, like nail polish. You wouldn't want lumpy nail polish. You just want nice and thin and smooth coats. Now when I get to little areas that are a little bit tighter, I just kind of get in there with my brush, just kind of move it back and forth until it reaches the edge. And then I'm going along this edge carefully. And I know this is a stem, but it's going to be a yellow stem. Okay, now I'm just going through. Probably should stay with the same direction. It kind of pulls the paint off if you go back and forth. So I'm going through and just smoothing out my paint. I'm also going to do the 25 cents, I think, in this color, so it stands out nice and bright. Now this is not the only stencil you can do. This is just one I had pre-cut on hand that I thought I would use as my demo. You can go on our website and look at our designs on our website. It's under workshops, and then it has a little drop-down menu, and it says our designs. And in there, that's where you can pick any of our designs. I mean, not a sled, of course, not at this time, but you know, any of the other designs that fit the 12 by 12 or the 12 by 16 or 18. And if you want, you know, one of the long and skinny ones or like the wine set, I'm totally able to do those. So just let me know. Just message me or text me or call me, and you know, I'm willing to cut whatever sign you want to do. So now I'm just moving on to my gray, and I'm just gonna go nice and thin. This gray is thin, it's pretty transparent, so it's definitely gonna need a second coat. And I do a second coat on all of it, just to make sure that I've covered the entire stencil. But see how you can barely read where it says ice cold now? That's gonna let you know that you have covered the entire surface of the stencil where the openings are. So I'm just gonna go, I usually just go up and down motions, top to bottom. Every now and then I'll just go side to side and cover the whole entire thing. You don't have to stay in the lines. That's the best part about a stencil, is you can just go right outside the lines and just get it on there. As long as you're not slopping it on there real thick. Just smooth it out. And once you get it on, it's not a bad idea to go back while it's still pretty wet and make it nice and smooth. Your sign will turn out much better if it's nice and smooth. So, doing everything gray. I don't know about these little dots, maybe yellow. Yeah, I'm just using regular brush strokes, not like, this doesn't work. If you were using some kind of sponge, you could probably do that. Paint was lumpy, so get some of the lumps out. Just going back through, making sure I got every little bit of the stencil covered. And I'm going to get a little more yellow and do those little dots. Dry it off really well. Get a tiny bit of yellow here. A little bit, I got some of my gray on there. It doesn't matter. Whatever the top coat is what actually covers. Okay, so now I've got one coat on the whole thing, and it's very, very thin. You can still see, you can still read it. There's no lumps. It's just really thin paint. And I'm gonna let this dry and then move on and put one more coat. So we'll be right back. Okay, so I waited a few minutes. This is completely dry. It doesn't have to be completely dry, but if it's not dry or remotely dry, you'll just be pushing paint around. So it's best to let it dry, do the second coat. Okay, see how much better it looks this time around? Everything is very solidly covered. So it's about ready to go. So my second coat of paint is going to dry, and then I'll come back and we'll remove the stencil. Okay, we got the second coat of paint on, and now it's all dry, and I don't see any major spots that I missed. So what I'm gonna do is peel the stencil off. Now if you flip over the back of the stencil, you'll see the grain in your wood. Mine goes side to side. So what I wanna do is peel the stencil the opposite of that. You do not wanna go side to side. You don't wanna go with the grain of the wood. You wanna go top to bottom, depending on how you painted it. If you did your sign the other way, you're gonna wanna go the other way. So what I'm gonna do is just start down here, and I'm gonna try to remove almost all the stencil, and we destroy these, so don't worry if it starts ripping apart. So what I want to do is just get like almost all the stencil off that I can by just peeling it backwards. This is the messy part, almost messier than painting, and well, kids like it. I kind of get stressed out by it. So just try it, just keep pulling. It looks like you're pulling up your paint in places. You usually are not. It's just the blue stencil that you're pulling up here. And I'm just trying to get it as much as I can off of here. Go this way. Not pulling this way, just pulling this direction so that I don't have any slivers. And then usually you can get your fingernail under there and get any of the loose pieces to come up that you can. Very sticky because we glued it down with the Mod Podge and then we painted it down, so it's, you know, it doesn't want to come up. Kids like this part. So just keep picking at it until you get almost all of it off. Then when you get to a part, see where my stencil was kind of curved up right there, but I think it's fine. If you get to a part where there's nowhere to peel that, I do provide a little straight pin, and you can kind of poke at it with the straight pin. If you can get under it and lift it up, it'll come right up. I've been told, and I just scratched it there, I've been told that tweezers work really well. In our class we use a little pick like this. Cricut and Silhouette machines, they make a little pick that come with the machine to weed with. And you just want to lift it up and peel it out. With my pin, I can get under there, just kind of go alongside it and peel it out. This works pretty well. And then if you can get just a little of it up, you can usually get it all in one chunk. And this one's really glued down. I can hardly find an edge. And I usually scratch it, but you can go back with your pen and take a little bit of paint and just put it right back in there. See, but you didn't even know that was in there, these little lines. But you'll feel it. It feels raised up where the stencil is. And if you can't read it, you know that, well, maybe that comes out. And like on this E here. And I am impatient. I tend to scratch it a lot, but I do go back through with my brush, very thin amount of paint, and do some touch-ups. So I'm going to just keep picking away at this. and I'll come back and show you the finished product. Okay, so I got all the stencil weeded out, and I think she looks pretty good. I'm really glad I added a little lightness to that. And even though there's a little bit of green right there in my lemon, I kind of think it looks right. So you can see where I scratched. Let's see, I put a scratch right there. I put a scratch right there. So I'm going to go back through with my pick or with a needle and just lay some paint down on that scratch. It doesn't need to be a lot of paint. Just go really thin. And sometimes if you want to go in with a small brush, that's fine too. We do that a lot in class. There's always a little bit of touch-ups. But overall, I think the sign turned out very well. So if you have any questions on your sign or the process, please feel free to call me or message me. And I hope you enjoy your little sign kit. So it turned out pretty good. I'm very proud of it. I would love to see how your sign turned out. Please feel free to send me some photos of what your sign turned out like. Thanks for watching, guys, and thanks for supporting our small business during this time.